Lucy Connolly case as Britain's free speech row goes transatlantic. But is it really up to Donald Trump to intervene in what are our affairs? And Britain is to ask the tiny Balkan nation of Kosovo to host return hubs for failed asylum seekers after Albania turned us down and we handed back Bowers to the EU. And of course, the surrender of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Is Britain standing on the world stage now with a begging bowl? And army leaders are being urged to stop shouting at their junior recruits and be more like the softly spoken David Beckham, yes, of football. Are we letting our military go a little soft when they should actually be toughening up? And have you seen this yet? Yes, take a look at this on your screens right now. Can you tell me what on earth is going on here? Is that a push? Is that a shove? Is that a slap? That is Brigitte Macron, the wife of President Emmanuel Macron, seemingly shoving him. What on earth happened there? Stay tuned to find out. Well, I've got a fantastic panel with me tonight. Keeping me company, it is the journalist and broadcaster Fahima Mohammed and political commentator Charlie Downs as well. So stick with us. We're going to take you to the latest news headlines and we'll be back in a tick.
Very good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. Donald Trump has lashed out at Vladimir Putin, calling him, quote, absolutely crazy. That's after Russia launched its biggest drone attack yet on Ukraine. Ukraine's Air Force says Moscow sent a record number of drones overnight, while Russia claims to have intercepted 96 from Kyiv. Donald Trump warned Vladimir Putin is needlessly killing people and threatened tougher sanctions on Russia.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all.
Well, despite that criticism, the Kremlin thanked Donald Trump for his role in the peace talks, blaming what they described as emotional overload for his comments. And the Kremlin has also hit back at claims of Russian involvement in an alleged arson attack on Sir Keir Starmer's properties. Asked about reported links, Moscow said such accusations are false, unsubstantiated and ridiculous. A Kremlin spokesperson added, quote, London seems to think Russia is behind all the bad things that happen in Britain. No evidence has been made public linking Russia to the incident, and the Labour leader and Prime Minister has not yet commented on the reports. A 50% tariff on EU goods heading to the United States has been delayed, with President Trump now pushing the start date back from the 1st of June to the 9th of July. He says it's to allow time for serious negotiations with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen after the pair spoke last night. The EU isn't giving any details of that call, but says it's given fresh momentum to the talks. The move had been expected to spark a major escalation in transatlantic trade tensions, but now both sides have just weeks to strike a deal. Here, the government is under fire over its U-turn on winter fuel payments and also facing pressure to axe the two-child benefit cap. It could cost the Treasury up to £5 billion if both policies are reversed. The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, has hinted an announcement could come on the 11th of June with the Chancellor's spending review. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is reportedly pledging to scrap both policies if Reform UK gains ground. And the government is also reportedly eyeing Kosovo as a possible location to return failed UK asylum seekers. It's part of Labour's plan to create so-called returns hubs overseas where migrants would be sent after exhausting all legal appeals. The Times says Kosovo is one of 9 countries on the shortlist. Kosovo's president says she is open to talks but hasn't yet been approached by the UK. A similar proposal was also publicly rejected by Albania's Prime Minister during a recent visit earlier this month by the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. King Charles and Queen Camilla are set to land in Canada very shortly in a show of solidarity as the country faces taunts from Donald Trump. It's their first visit since the King's cancer diagnosis, and it comes at the invitation of Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. The King is expected to deliver a rare speech from the throne in Parliament, the first by a monarch in nearly 50 years. That is expected to defend Canadian sovereignty and push back on Donald Trump's calls for Canada to become America's 51st state. The visit includes meetings with Indigenous leaders and Canada's first Indigenous Governor-General. And let's take you live to Liverpool, where we can see scenes of red smoke, fireworks and confetti filling the air as fans... it was looking slightly more exciting a few moments ago. The streets appear to be emptying after the fans celebrate their 20th top-flight title in what was a sea of red, slightly more grey now along the Strand. After a 3-hour procession, their record-breaking season is wrapped up with one huge party in the city. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace have also been out in force today, lifting their first major trophy with a parade to mark their FA Cup victory. And in North London, Arsenal's women have been celebrating a historic Champions League win with fans at the Emirates. Those are the latest headlines for now. Do stay tuned for that arrival from King Charles and Queen Camilla. First, though, let's check in with Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
OK, welcome to Dewbs Co, but with me, Emily Carver, this evening. And joining me until 7 o'clock is my panel, the journalist and broadcaster Fahima Mohammed and political commentator Charlie Downs as well. So do keep in touch throughout the show. Get your views in, gbnews.com/your say. We've got quite a lot to talk about, actually, for a bank holiday Monday. We've got the Royals just about to touch down in Canada, which is very interesting considering all the politics that's going on there with Donald Trump in Canada, a 51st state and whatever else. Mark Carney being the former Bank of England governor and all of that. So that could get exciting when King Charles play it well, you know, with all this politics going on. But I want to get stuck into our first debate because, speaking of Donald Trump, he is weighing in from across the Atlantic. Questions continue between Washington and Westminster over freedom of speech. And the White House have now actually confirmed that they are monitoring the case of Lucy Connolly. Now, this is the woman who was jailed over a controversial social media post, an aggressive social media post about migrant hotels. Now, US officials have met many British activists and they're challenging laws like the Online Safety Act. But they're very interested in this particular case, and it's something I believe Ben Leo on this channel raised with Charlie Kirk, a prominent Republican voice over in the United States. He said he was going to raise it with Marco Rubio, and it looks like it's all happened quite quickly. Now, I spoke earlier to Lucy Connolly's husband, Ray Connolly, and here's what he had to say.
I was absolutely delighted that President Trump, the leader of the free world, is getting involved in this case. More, obviously, for my wife as well, but also for freedom of speech being under attack. So, well, since July. So I'm absolutely delighted. What's not to be over the moon about?
So there you go. Those are the views of Lucy Connolly's husband. But what do you think? Should Donald Trump stay out of our affairs, or is this, in fact, an intervention that we do need in this country? Charlie Downs, what do you reckon?
Well, I'm uneasy about any kind of American interference in our politics, because I think that our politics have become thoroughly Americanized over the last maybe 5 decades.
How so?
Well, I think, certainly the show business aspect of politics, we've very much imported that into our country, but actually our culture more generally...
Are you thinking Nigel Farage with the fireworks and the big rallies?
He's maybe a contemporary example, but I think that people have wanted increasingly their politicians to be relatable. Blair, actually, I think, is maybe even a better example. He was seeking to be a relatable kind of down-to-earth kind of guy that you sort of imagine, I don't know, having a beer with or something. That was certainly the brand he tried to build for himself. And that's a very American idea, I think, because just being relatable does not a leader make, right? However, I also think that that extends to our culture more generally. I don't like the way that American culture has almost supplanted British culture in our own nation, whether that's when you look at the high streets and see American brands everywhere, but, you know, McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever else, or in the film industry.
Sounds like you quite like the French model, where it's, you know, absolutely dreadful if a McDonald's appears anywhere near your hometown.
No, I am. I'm quite into that. I'm quite into that. Now, with all of that being said, I do think in political matters like this, because the American empire is the hegemonic global power in this, era. I do think it's uniquely positioned to do something about cases where there is injustice taking place. Now, I'm thinking, for example, of the British Empire and the way in which the British Empire used its power and wealth in the 19th century to abolish the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, using the West Africa Squadron. And I'm wondering whether the American empire might be similarly well positioned to liberate Europe in certain ways, whether that's infringements on free speech or other issues.
We need liberation from the United States, Fahima.
We need liberation from these Washington spin doctors, I think.
Right.
Trying to come into sort of British courts and decide what our justice system is about. They wouldn't like it if we interfered with, for example, Julian Assange's case or anything for that matter. We have, clear laws in this country. We need to trust it. And it's setting a precedent if they actually come in to even British-owned sovereignty. I think at the end of the day, and it weakens it as well.
I think, Fahima, just on that point, because I'm following what you're saying, and I do agree to an extent, but I do think that the Trump administration is genuinely concerned about the state of freedom of speech in this country.
Well, we have a different ruling and justice system here. We also have freedom of speech, protection for public safety and responsibility of freedom of speech. That's why we have the Public Law Order Act, right? And we have the sort of, some people may not like that term, but hate speech kind of like, in acts. So that goes beyond the sort of waters that we can actually sort of, recognise in the US. And I think it works well for us. We have an issue in our country. If we do, we address
when
it
a woman
in
is
our
sentenced
country.
to 31 months?
Could I just come in here? Because I think this is a really important point. Because I agree with you that we don't want Washington spin doctors and American agents influencing our politics, right? I'm no fan of that either. But with that being said, when ordinary people in this country feel so unable to change the state of affairs at the ballot box because they feel that the people actually making decisions about how the country is governed are not the public-facing elected element of government, but actually are judges, lawyers, bureaucrats, etc.
Civil servants.
What other recourse do people have other than to turn to a greater power, an ally, and say, actually, could we have your help with this?
Also, I think America is just stunned by this particular case.
They have their own problems to worry about.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
They don't need to interfere here.
Inciting racial hatred, incitement to violence in America, much higher threshold. So it has to be imminent. There has to be a time and a place mentioned for it to that legal threshold. So I think for people who are watching this from the United States, they're genuinely shocked that Britain would have a lower threshold
to be fair,
for this type of
watching a lot of
crime.
things that are happening in America right now, where they're giving so much of their money across the board when they need it inside their actual country itself, is another problem that we can also address and also, debunk, whatever they're saying about the UK. I think we need to worry about our own systems, and we have the powers, even if we don't. That's why we're a democracy, to actually ask for that and have policies made better, whether it's in the justice system, whether it's civil service or whatever it is, and it should be within UK sort of, ground, land, waters, and within the people that are there, not outside.
But what is there to debunk, Fahima? Because I think that this case of Lucy Connolly has cut through particularly because of the context in which it's taking place, where we've seen, for example, Hugh Edwards, who was convicted of possession of indecent images of children, receive a 6-month suspended sentence. Similarly, Mansour Khan, an NHS doctor, for the same crime, received an 8-month suspended sentence. Adil Rashid, who actually raped a child, got no prison sentence because the reason given was he didn't have enough knowledge of women because of the school that he had attended, a madrasa. And so the idea that Lucy Connolly, for posting a tweet, an inflammatory tweet, an inciting tweet, which I don't dispute that there was incitement there, and I do think that she probably deserved maybe a fine or a 2-week community service or something like that, right? We're not in disagreement there. But the idea that she should receive a 31-month sentence when people who are committing real crimes that actually have a tangible, immediate effect on other people of the most horrendous, heinous sort, when those people are not receiving appropriate sentences, there is injustice there. There is a 2-tier aspect to that. And when people feel they can't change that at the ballot box, what do you expect people to do?
Well, I think we need to understand law and the justice system, and I work within it. And you have to understand case by case. There's no point comparing. She actually did have a much lesser sentence than what was for her sort of, case in the first place.
Even so, 31 months? 31 months?
I do think it was a lot, personally, but there has to be some sort of understanding and sort of, we need to also support our justice system in order for it to improve and to, know that our own can cope. We have one of the best judges, lawyers and barristers in the country and across the globe, so we need to trust that and actually improve on that.
So for him, we should just accept any ruling, any sentence, because it's our justice system and we have to respect it, and therefore it can never be wrong.
It's not about not being wrong, but again, case by case. She did plead guilty, and there is some sort of accountability there. So you can't compare that to other cases.
Although it was
have different sort of, backing.
Just on that, Fahima, because it's interesting you raised that, because speaking to Ray, Lucy Connolly's husband, earlier, he suggested that she was pressured into that, and that others had advised against pleading guilty for various different reasons.
So,
whether she received the best counsel is a question mark over this one. But Charlie, to the America point, well, let me just read out a couple of comments actually. Michael says, "Good on the Donald. I wish he would make us the 51st state." Do you really mean that? Do you really mean that, Michael? Vikram just says Lucy should not be in prison. Bobby says, "I don't think they are monitoring Lucy. They're monitoring Starmer's reaction to their comment." Yes, this is interesting because, of course, Keir Starmer has very publicly said, Charlie, that we have absolutely no issue with free speech in this country. Got into a bit of a tiff with JD Vance on the issue, and seems to be in denial that there is any issue, not just with this case, but with anything.
Well, I have no doubt that the American State Department would be prepared to use Lucy Connolly as a political pawn, right? I don't think anybody is doubting that. But the question is whether they can actually achieve some good along the way. And I think they can.
Well, I should just say that we are expecting the King and Queen Camilla to arrive in Canada any moment now. There we go. The plane has arrived in Ottawa with the King and Queen on board. Now, we are going to catch up with with Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, who's flown all the way out there as well to cover this trip. Now, I believe it's just going to be a 24-hour visit, but it's very significant for quite a few different reasons. For example, this is the first time in, I believe, 20-odd years that a king has delivered a speech from their Houses of Parliament in Canada. It's been 7 decades since a British monarch opened a new session of Parliament, 50 years since a British monarch has delivered a speech from the throne. Now, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister there, over in Canada, who of course was the Governor of the Bank of England over here not too long ago, he's delighted by this trip because, of course, Donald Trump has been saying all sorts about Canada, not least that Canada should become the 51st state of the United States of America. So I do wonder whether King Charles will be saying anything about that, hearing that British ministers very much want him to be shielded from any sort of political controversy that there could be. But here we go, we're looking at live pictures there of Ottawa. Charlie, do you think that the King has to balance things here?
Well, this is what's interesting, is the way in which the UK elite in general are kind of positioning themselves as geopolitical middlemen. And we've seen that over the last few months, especially with the Ukraine summit in March, for example. The way that Starmer was mediating between the States and Ukraine after Zelensky and Trump's bust up in the White House. And now we're seeing between the US and Canada. And I think that this is really a response to the UK's increasing irrelevance on the world stage. The increasing perception that the UK is not a great power and that we are kind of descending into being a bit of a backwater.
Well, we're going to be talking about that a little bit more, Charlie, but I've got to bring in Cameron Walker, who is there in Ottawa. Cameron, tell us.
Hi, Emily. Good evening to where you are. Yes, you're just seeing the steps attached to the aircraft of the Royal Canadian Air Force jet here in Ottawa, and it is a hugely significant moment, as you have been saying, because of course it is the first time that King Charles will walk down these steps and step foot on Canadian soil as the nation's sovereign. And in today's context, that is even more significant than it usually would be. But Governor General of Canada, Mary Simon, this morning, who's the representative of King Charles here in Canada. She says this visit reaffirms the enduring constitutional bonds that has shaped Canada's journey into a proud and independent nation. Note that word independent because, of course, President Trump has expressed his desire to annex Canada to be part of the United States, become the 51st state of the United States of America. And of course, officials here in Canada have been saying, look, this King Charles's visit reaffirms the sovereignty of the nation. But the King has a very delicate diplomatic tightrope to walk here, because the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, the recently elected Prime Minister, largely elected on an anti-Trump ticket, has said on the record that Canadians have been quite disappointed with our own Prime Minister, the UK government, Sir Keir Starmer, inviting President Trump for an unprecedented second state visit to the United Kingdom. Now, sources close to the King say, look, his two roles as King of Canada and King of the United Kingdom are totally separate. Of course, the King, as a constitutional monarch, acts on the advice of his two governments, and if those two governments clash on how to deal with President Donald Trump, there's not much the King can do about it. But of course, what he can do is exercise this soft power. You mentioned, of course, that he will be delivering the speech inside the Senate. There you go, the door just opening of this Airbus DC-330 Husky aircraft, which has taken the King from RAF Bryce Norton in England. And of course, him delivering the speech, we doubt he's going to talk specifically about President Donald Trump and what he's been saying. But of course, actions sometimes speak louder than words, and the timing of this visit cannot be more significant. We're just getting a cheer, a little bit of a cheer perhaps from some of the military personnel who have come to greet His Majesty's from the aircraft. We've got the Governor General of Canada obviously is going to be greeting His Majesty at the bottom of the steps, as well as the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, as well. A 25-member honour guard from the Royal Canadian Dragoons, for which His Majesty is a Colonel-in-Chief, and two officers of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So it's pomp, it's pageantry as well, but of course it is a highly historical visit for His Majesty the King, stepping foot on Canadian soil at this time of the geopolitical situation is far from stable when it comes to relations with President Donald Trump. But this visit was actually meant to happen a year ago, but because of the King's cancer diagnosis and subsequent treatment, remember, he's still undergoing a weekly cycle of cancer, and the then Canadian election cycle, the visit had to be postponed up until this point. But it's pretty, let's say, good timing for Mark Carney in terms of the kudos to open the 45th session of the Canadian Parliament tomorrow as Donald Trump continues his rhetoric around annexing Canada to become the 51st state of the United States. So we just see this guard of honour now, for those of you watching on television.
The plane there. You've been in Canada for a few hours, I believe. What is the view of the sort of average Canadian, if there is one, towards the monarchy? Is there a lot of support, love, deference? What's the feeling?
So we arrived about 24 hours ago, Emily, and to be honest, I would say if it wasn't for the whole President Trump thing, there would be a lot of indifference, perhaps, for the monarchy from ordinary Canadians. But every single person, Emily, I spoke to yesterday, ordinary citizens I was stopping on the street to ask what they thought, was one of complete anger towards Donald Trump for his comments about Canadian sovereignty, and also all of them saying that King Charles could be a bit of a, excuse the pun, but a trump card in terms of reinforcing the sovereignty of Canada here, because of course King Charles is the head of state of Canada, and he has been since his mother's death on the 8th of September 2022. He's going to become the second monarch ever to open a new session of the Canadian Parliament, so it is pretty significant. And then of course for Queen Camilla as well, her great-great-great-grandfather was the premier of the then province of Canada, when of course the country was put, well, the country or the province was part of the British Empire. So of course the relationship that the Crown has with this country stretches back well over a century, and I think ordinary Canadians are relatively excited about it. I mean, the Canadian media have been rolling on this story all day, and in fact they claim that Canadians are wanting the King to stand up for Canada. But like I said, I can't imagine he's going to say anything particularly too politically controversial, because he can't, because he's a constitutional monarch. He can't get involved with politics. But what he can do is show up here the image of him, as we're hopefully in the next minute or so about to see the King stepping off the plane, down the steps onto the tarmac, is going to be a historical moment, reaffirming that sovereignty of Canada and reminding President Trump who the head of state of Canada is.
Yes, it'll be very interesting to see how he words things in that speech. Oh, there we go, Cameron.
And here he is, His Majesty the King. His Majesty the King and Queen Camilla here, stepping down the steps of the Royal Canadian Air Force jet for the first time, of course, as sovereign of Canada. A hugely historic moment here, and a whole bunch of dignitaries you can probably imagine are here to greet him, including Governor General of Canada and the newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney, who the King, of course, has quite a strong relationship with anyway, because that is the former governor of the Bank of England. But of course, this time, very significant, because he is, of course, the Prime Minister of Canada, elected largely on an anti-Trump ticket. So with the royal family, Emily, images sometimes speak louder than words, and that is what we are seeing here. A reminder that King Charles is head of state in Canada, reminding President Trump, the Canadians hope, that Canada is an independent, sovereign nation, and that really is the overwhelming message speaking to ordinary Canadians here ahead of His Majesty's arrival. That is what they want, this very short trip, 20 hours or so, that they want to get out of it. And of course, the King and Queen, although they've just been on a 7-8 hour flight, so they're probably a little bit jet lagged, they've got a lot of engagements going on this evening, London time, afternoon here in Ottawa. They're going to be heading to Community Park, Lansdowne Park, where they're going to be celebrating Canadian culture. I hear there's an ice hockey puck demonstration that's going to be taking place. Then they're going to go off to Rideau Hall, which is the Governor General's residence here in Canada. He'll have an audience with the Governor General as well as Prime Minister Carney, and the Queen, quite poignantly, is going to be sworn in as a Privy Councillor of because her roots, as I just said, her great-great-great-grandfather was the Premier of the former province of Canada, but also it shows the commitment the King has to his consort, Camilla, and it means the Queen, constitutionally, can now advise the King on Canadian affairs and Canadian matters of state. Of course, we've got a Privy Council in the United Kingdom, a totally separate one here for Canada as well. But I think the big show-stopping day, Emily, will be tomorrow. All eyes on that speech. What has Mark Carney's government written for His Majesty to say in front of the world's press and indeed the world's broadcasting cameras? Remember, it's going to be Mark Carney and his government writing the speech, not the King. And of course, we know Mark Carney's view on Canada, saying it should never be for sale, particularly to President Donald Trump. But as I said, I don't think it's going to be anything too direct with that message. I suspect there will be some kind of subtle message to that fact, though.
On that, so the Canadian government write the speech, but is there a to and fro? Is there some editing that can be had?
His Majesty greets a number of dignitaries here, as well as the Prime Minister. We've got a couple of Indigenous community leaders who are greeting their Majesties, the King and Queen, as well as the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, Edith Dumont, and her husband, and the Queen is receiving a bouquet of flowers from Leela Graham, who is 14 years old, and she is known for her long-standing support for the Lanark County Food Bank. And of course, we know the King is all about sustainable food and reusing leftover food to feed those in need. So I suspect it's going to be a lot of community members who are going to be lined up in order to meet their Majesties over the next 20 hours. But it is an incredibly short trip, Emily. Of course, the King's still undergoing a weekly cycle of cancer treatment, but I think it shows the determination of the King to want to be here in Canada. It is his constitutional duty, and he wanted, of course, to visit Canada as the country's head of state. And I believe His Majesty, the King and Queen, are just wandering over now to greet two school groups who have been specially brought here to Ottawa's airport to greet their Majesties. It's the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Elementary School from Quebec, which is an elementary school with 550 students that offer bilingual education in French and English, of course, as would be the case with Quebec and Canada. And there is also another school as well greeting their Majesties here. I'm told that the King was particularly keen to greet younger Canadians, the next generation of Canadians during this very short visit. Perhaps there will be a slightly longer one where the King will be going to different provinces throughout the country later on in his reign. But for now, it's just a very short, sharp 20-hour trip, as he's been invited by Mark Carney and his government to open its 45th session of Parliament. But I mean, Emily, these pictures, if you're still seeing on your screens, if you're watching on television, truly historic, because it is the first time he has stepped foot on Canadian soil as the country's head of state.
Something, and such a rare occasion, Cameron. 50 years, I'm reading, since a British monarch has delivered a speech from the throne in Canada. 7 decades since the monarch opened a new session of Parliament there as well. This is a really significant moment, and as you say, Mark Carney is absolutely delighted that it's happening right now.
I believe we're having some communications issues here. I can't actually hear you, but somebody else.
OK, well, I think we may have lost Cameron Walker there, but he talked us through that disembarkment. The King and Queen are there in Ottawa. They've arrived for their 24-hour visit in Canada, but the timing is very interesting. Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister over there, wanting to reassert that actually we are an independent country with a monarchy. And yes, Donald Trump, we don't want to be the 51st state of the United States of America. So there you go, the King and Queen shaking lots of hands. It looks like just ordinary local people there, school children, they're ready and waiting, as well as representatives from various communities over there in Canada. Lots is planned, not least that speech, that big speech from the throne. What will be included in that? I'm sure Mark Carney will want to reiterate Canada's independence, but the King will have to be a tad careful, presumably as well, not to appear political in all of this. So as we wait for Cameron to return, Fahima, this is a dairy to bring you in on this. The King and Queen arriving in Canada, 24 hours. The context of Donald Trump, of course, is there in the background, and everything he said about Canada and 51st state and the trade wars and all of this. It's significant.
It is significant, but a handshake means little without healing behind it, I feel. And generally, there was a Angus Reid poll recently, a couple of years ago, that showed over 50% of Canadians actually wanted to reconsider the monarchy after Queen Elizabeth's passing anyway. And the Indigenous leaders also have called for more genuine reckoning with colonial legacy. So there is obviously, you know, a lot that's going on within the Canadians, as well as not just, you know, with their sort of like, you know, geographical allies, the US, but also with the UK. And they want to probably be completely independent and actually be by themselves.
We have seen the rise of those movements, but we're going to go back to Cameron because I believe we've re-established his connection. Cameron, we're looking at images now of the King and Queen greeting various members of the public.
Yes, absolutely, Emily. Brought especially, they've been greeting some school children here from the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Elementary School from Quebec, a bilingual school, of course, speaking both English and French. And the excitement that these school children and these members of local communities that they had over the last hour as they were patiently waiting in this heat, in the Ottawa sunshine in the early summer, is really easy to feel. You know, they have been incredibly excited about meeting His Majesty, and the King and palace officials were really keen, I think, for the sovereign to meet younger generations of Canadians, again reinforcing that message of Canadian sovereignty. And these images are being beamed around the world, broadcast live all across Canada, all across the United Kingdom and perhaps the wider world as well. Again, reinforcing that message that it is King Charles, as you're seeing on your screens, as head of state of Canada, and not, as Canadians keep telling me, or at pains to tell me, not President Donald Trump of the US, despite his calls, of course, for Canada to become the 51st state of the United States of America, effectively annexing the country. And it was Mark Carney, of course, who invited King Charles, but of course during this particular visit he is going to be walking a very tight diplomatic tightrope, a very awkward one, because of course Prime Minister Starmer in the UK has invited President Trump on an unprecedented second state visit. So although King Charles is going to have to roll out the red carpet for President Trump, effectively kind of rewarding him for or buttering him up a little bit for UK state deals and the rest, Canadians have been a little bit put off that Donald Trump is being rewarded by the King, effectively, even though he's calling for the head of state perhaps to change in Canada to the United States presidents. But that's clearly not going to happen anytime soon, as King Charles steps foot on Canadian soil for the first time as sovereign.
Say tomorrow will be the big day. Tell us exactly the order of events that we can expect, Cameron.
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. So there's going to be a huge pomp and pageantry arrival for the King at the Canadian Parliament alongside the Queen. I believe it's in the State Landau coach that are going to be transported in the centre of Ottawa. Think about crowds as we see that we're very used to in London, aren't we? But of course, it's much more of a rarity in Ottawa. And then the King will be taken into the Senate chamber with the Guard of Honour. He will then meet members of Parliament here in Canada, as well as senators, the upper house, of course, similar to the House of Lords. He will then sit on this ancient throne carved from a walnut tree which once stood in Windsor Great Park in the United Kingdom, and deliver, I'm told, on behalf of the Canadian government, written by the Canadian government. So a majority of that speech is probably going to be the domestic political agenda of Mark Carney's premiership, the Prime Minister of Canada, but I suspect there will be some kind of nod to the fact that Canada, well, at least to remind Canadians and the world who the head of state is, that Canada is a strong, independent nation, as we've heard from the Governor-General of Canada earlier on this morning, was that effect, perhaps sending a subtle message to Donald Trump. The King and Queen are then expected to lay a wreath National War Memorial in Ottawa, just a short walk from the Senate. So I suspect he'll be meeting members of the public, greeting members of the public outside the Senate building as well as he wanders over there. And then, of course, he's back home again. So a really, really short trip from the time of this plane landing that you're probably seeing on your screens or very close to your screens to then taking off again with the King inside it. It's only about 20 hours, so it's a really, really short trip, Emily.
It's a very short trip, and we're just looking at the tarmac now with the cars about to depart for their first visit. So, Cameron, we'll leave you there. Thank you very much indeed for talking us through that arrival. The King and Queen are now in Canada for that 24-hour visit, and tomorrow that speech from the throne reading out the government's agenda to be. So there you go, coming back to the studio. Thank you very much. I am quite shocked about how many people, well, I'm not that shocked actually, genuinely. Quite a lot of you getting in touch and saying, oh, if only the UK could be the 51st state of the United States of America. Charlie Downs is here and he's tutting at that very thought. He thinks that things have become too Americanised, not too little, but I think perhaps there's a little tongue-in-cheek, I think, from some of our viewers. I think perhaps not totally serious. But we're going to move on because there's lots else to talk about. And Britain is now turning to the small Balkan nation of Kosovo with a request to host return hubs for failed asylum seekers. That's following the Prime Minister's visit to Albania to ask the same question, only for them to quite publicly rebuff the suggestion and refuse to take part in some kind of returns hub agreement with Albania. Now, this comes at a time when the UK has also handed back powers to the European Union in several areas. We've surrendered the Chagos Islands to Mauritius against the will of the Chagossians, and it seems to be most Brits as well. So is this I don't want to be too negative about Britain, but I'll talk about the government instead. Is it all getting a little bit embarrassing? You know, we're supposed to still be quite an important power, a global power perhaps, but it seems like we're standing on the world stage now with a bit of a begging bowl, hoping that others are going to give us something. And have we lost our leverage here? Should we be throwing our weight around a little more? Charlie Downs and Fahima Mohammed are still with me. Charlie, what do you reckon to this one?
I don't buy it, to be honest. It just seems like more hand-wringing on this topic, on this issue, which is one of the most pressing of our time. I don't like the fact that we are assuming that we need to involve other nations in this problem, actually. I don't see why we can't just use an uninhabited British island, for example, to deal with this problem, like Tarrant, which is in the Outer Hebrides.
Well, you've been looking up some options for us?
Why not? I mean, nobody else is going to do it, apparently. But that's an uninhabited island in the Outer Hebrides that I think it would be quite feasible for us to construct some sort of facility there to hold asylum seekers. Now, there is a far larger issue at play here, because any solution that relies on kind of detaining people and holding them and processing them and all that sort of thing assumes that we're going to be able to... Well, it assumes we're going to be able to use that strategy to deal with this issue in its totality. But I think if we approach it in that way, we're going to be dealing with it for several centuries, because the fact of the matter is, according to a Pew Research paper from 2017, there are as many as and this was 2017, there were as many as 1.5 million illegal migrants in Britain. So that was a combination, obviously, of people who've come over illegally and also those who have outstayed visas and this sort of thing. And all of those people, they do not belong in our country. They cannot remain here. We are not a we're not a self-respecting, self-governing country. All the while, there are people who are here who have no right to be here. Now, bearing in mind there has been hundreds of thousands more channel crossings since 2017, that number could be more like 2 million now. So all of these kind of hand-wringing strategies, these very weak, options when it comes to dealing with this problem, I just don't think are going to solve it. And that's to say nothing, by the way, of the fact that Kosovo is a notoriously corrupt country, right? So if we even go into business with them, I don't think we can be sure that they're actually going to execute this deal properly, because they're the 83rd most corrupt country in the world, right? And they have a particular problem with organised crime.
Where's Rwanda on that list?
I don't know off the top of my head.
That would be very interesting to know.
See. But when it comes to organised crime, they're poor management of cases, high acquittal rates and all that sort of thing. And organised crime is obviously deeply
But the truth is, Charlie, there aren't that many countries out there who have lower corruption than our country.
Then why involve anyone else?
And
as I said?
I completely I agree with you on that one. I think it is a little bit embarrassing. I think Keir Starmer probably is regretting Fahima ditching the Rwanda scheme, because that would have been more useful as a deterrent, because people would only be sent theoretically to Kosovo once they've exhausted all of the legal avenues, all of the challenges, all of the courts, all of the ECHR, whatever else, to be able to stay here. So it's not really going to be a deterrent. It's just going to be somewhere to put people so we don't have to pay for hotels. I can't really see it going much further than that.
Absolutely, and I'm not used to actually agreeing with my opponents most of the time as well. So for me, that's a first. But the other point is absolutely that it's such a distraction to the real problem, as Charlie mentioned, and there are so much more that we can improve here, not just for the immediate issue, but for the long term, with regards to the processes being done much quicker, because they're waiting for not just months but years to get processed, as well as the whole system of having these kind of legal routes so that they do not actually have the problem of the boats in the first place, allying with people like France, whether you like them or not, so that we can actually have better deals to deal with this issue in the first place before they even reach our waters.
So would you just open up routes from any country that's
absolutely
suffering in any way?
It's not like that. At the end of the day, we also have a responsibility to an extent, but with that, we are putting it all under one banner to say that they're all bad, they're all criminals, they're all illegal, when actually, if they were coming here, they would be actually criminalised and put to jail. They are not.
Well, people say that they should be criminalised. I mean, the Conservative government did try with their immigration bill. I can't remember the exact wording of the bill. They said that if you arrive here illegally, you are illegal, and therefore the plan was to send them to Rwanda, right? Well, obviously, that didn't happen because of all the legal challenges, but it seems now that we just see them as irregular.
Yeah, well, the doctrine of human rights that has so thoroughly captured all of the institutions that govern our country prevents us from regarding those who arrive here illegally, who have committed a crime before they've even entered the country, as criminals, because we are forced to view them, we're forced to assume that they are essentially women and children and refugees, right? And I think that's a big part of the problem. But I wanted to pick up on something you said, Fahima, and we may well disagree on this, so we'll give the audience
drum roll.
I am now of the belief that we are in no position as a nation to have an asylum system at all. I don't think we should be accepting any refugees from anywhere, because one of the great utilities of having a refugee asylum system is that it gives you political capital on the world stage. And as I said already today...
Not the kindness of our hearts is a relatively...
Very anti-Christian for someone who's Christian as well.
Yeah, well, perhaps. But I also think that we have a duty to our own people before we do the people of all the world.
Well, that's I don't think we have the money... inflammatory statement as well.
But I don't think we have the money or the space or the resources to have an asylum system at this moment in time, because I don't know if you've been out there recently, Fahima, but people are really struggling, right? And I think they feel already that the government's not on their side. So if the government is still intent on having this luxurious asylum system that we have, this excessive... this surplus to requirement asylum system that we have, I'm not surprised that people are becoming more and more radicalised on the issue. And so I think the solution is, look, let's put our hands up and say, we're in no position as a nation to be doing this sort of
OK, Charlie, gotcha. No asylum system at all until we've fixed all the issues in this country. What
really? And if that's the case, then they shouldn't really be involving themselves in foreign policies and all of their...
You're not going to find any disagreement from me there.
So at the end of the day, you know, it is a two-way system, and you can't just do one thing and ignore the other.
Hang on that foreign policy, you know... Damned if they do, damned if they don't. Damned if we do, damned if we don't. Because a lot of people look to Britain, they look to the United States of America when things are turning badly.
Not really. It's them going and getting themselves
looking for support,
illegally.
looking for defence, looking for whatever else it is. And then when countries do get involved, like Britain and the United States,
the Britain and the US get involved illegally.
Yes, and I do think that many of those on my side of this debate, they neglect to mention the fact that it is actually Western imperialism that has displaced so many of the people who have now arrived in Europe as, you know, quote-unquote refugees, right? And many of them are legitimately seeking refuge. They've had their homes destroyed, they've had their countries torn up, Afghanistan, Iraq, elsewhere, and so on, Libya, right? You're not going to find disagreement from me there. And so I agree with you that part of this package has to be a fundamental reimagining of our foreign policy as a country, because I don't think it is our place to spread democracy to the Middle East or Africa.
Well, OK, but then you have to ignore massive human rights abuses in other countries, right? Dictatorships where people are asking for help from the West.
Are we in any
people
position?
They're not asking for the help of the West. The West are going into the Middle East and getting trillions of dollars and pounds.
There are circumstances where the West has made awful interventionist decisions that have not worked out very well, but I think it is wrong to deny that countries do look to Western powers when they're in times of need for various different reasons.
So the next question is, are we in any position to help those countries?
Well, perhaps not.
I don't think we are.
Perhaps not. Well, coming up, nearly half of white men say they're self-censoring, they're censoring themselves at work, fearing their words could cost them their jobs. A third feel the least valued of any employee. This is according to new research polling. Is that fair?
Nigel is back.
Good evening.
Unfiltered.
Are these proposals bold enough?
Uncompromising.
Will it bring growth?
Unmissable.
We as a country are brilliant.
Nigel Farage returns next Tuesday from 7 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewberry, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Right, OK, 6:49 is the time. Now we have some breaking news to bring you. A car has rammed through the crowd at the trophy parade celebrating Liverpool's Premier League victory. Now an eyewitness has told GB News that a car just rammed through the crowd in the city centre near Dale Street and Water Street. Now officers from Merseyside Police are in attendance and a police cordon has been put in place. So there you go. Reports a car has rammed through the crowd at the Liverpool Trophy parade. We'll bring you any updates as and when we get them, more information as well. But we are going to return to a final debate, which is an interesting one. Yes, new research polling shows almost half of white men are holding back their opinions at work, self-censoring themselves, worried that speaking freely could jeopardise their jobs. This is all according to a poll conducted by JL Partners, a very reputable pollster. A significant number of white men are concerned about being dismissed for saying something deemed inappropriate. 1 in 3 feel the least appreciated at their workplace. Right, OK, Charlie Downs, you are the token white male in the room. So tell us, well, you don't self-censor on this panel, or perhaps you do. I don't know. Have you been in a workplace where you felt stifled, unwanted?
Well, I have the privilege of not having to censor myself.
Yes,
in my work.
with your line of work.
And that is a privilege because we do live in increasingly censorious times. But it doesn't surprise me that the majority of white men feel this way, because I don't think anybody could deny that for the better part of 50 years, an ideology of anti-white hatred has made its way through our various institutions. And it began in academia in the 1960s and 70s and has moved through now finally to the very outer reaches of the power structure that governs Britain, including the police, including the army. I mean, West Yorkshire Police, for example, in April, were shown to be advertising jobs that were only open to, quote, underrepresented groups, which essentially meant if you're a white man, don't bother signing up. The same was true of Westminster Council, also in April, who had their staff take anti-white, or rather anti-white, sort of white privilege test, right? And I think that this sort of thing, therefore, it's no surprise that so many white men feel that they are being targeted.
Those examples are very interesting. Just need to say that they're not here to defend themselves because we don't have any right to reply with us right now on that one. But it's interesting because, Fahima, what do you reckon to this? Is it not concerning that a lot of white men are saying this, clearly not feeling comfortable in the workplace? That's not a healthy society, is it?
Well, let's just stop pretending that they're the only ones in the room. So at the end of the day, we need to obviously consider that maybe there are regulations and there are restrictions for a particular reason, and they need to obviously go that. Whatever they're complaining about, I don't know what they're saying that they're restricted from. I don't know what the fear is. It's not being specific enough for me. I don't understand that at all. I think there's a lot of sort of expression which is free, which is, you know, open when in workspace, and yes, workspaces are getting a lot tougher only because of the fact that there are sort of inequalities amongst men and women, for example, with ethnic minority groups. So we're just trying to create fairness here.
Well, I don't know.
Just on the topic
very quickly.
Yeah, on the topic of fairness, I think this is essential because I think the reason so many white men feel they're not able to speak out is because they do feel that everyone else gets to have an identity, because we live in the era of identity politics. You know, you're allowed to organise and speak on behalf of your black identity or your female identity or your Muslim identity, yet if you were to speak on behalf of your white identity or your English identity, you would be called a racist.
That's a good point, Charlie.
What you say.
We're going to have to end it there. We're going to have to end it there. What I will say is that we don't tread on eggshells in this room. Of course, we don't on Dewbs Co. But we are going to just bring you a little update on that breaking news to round off the show. Yes, a car has ran through a crowd at the Trivy Parade celebrating Liverpool's Premier League victory, and we have a statement from Merseyside Police that's just come in. They say, we're currently dealing with reports of a road traffic collision in Liverpool city centre. OK, we were contacted at just after 6 p.m. today, Monday the 26th of May. Following reports, a car had been in collision with a number of pedestrians on Water Street. Now, the car stopped at the scene and a male has been detained. Emergency services are currently on the scene. We will issue more updates as we have them. And, of course, our GB News will bring you any updates as and when we have them as well. Well, I'd like to thank my panel, Charlie Downs and Fahima Mohammed. Thank you very much indeed. Up next, it is GBN Tonight with the wonderful Martin Daubney.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, there's some welcome rainfall in the forecast for many of us. Sunshine and showers persisting in Scotland, and it's often going to be rather breezy. Now, we've got an area of low pressure clearing its way eastwards through this evening and overnight. A squeeze in the isobars, so it is going to be turning quite windy. This cloud and rain across northern parts of England, Wales and the southwest will continue to push its way eastwards into East Anglia and the southeast of England. Behind that, clearer spells developing, but still holding on to some frequent showers across western Scotland, otherwise temperatures 6 to 12 degrees. Now, it could be a chilly start in places across eastern parts of Scotland, but a bright start here too. Further out towards the west, that's where we hold on to further scattering of showers, again moving in on that brisk westerly wind. Now, a bright start initially across Northern Ireland and across much of England and Wales, but across the southwest of England, we're already seeing outbreaks of rain moving through. And it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy from the southwest, with heavy spells of rain pushing its way eastwards, so affecting Northern Ireland, Wales, southern parts of England, into the Midlands and then later into the southeast. Some of this rain could be heavy, especially over the hills and across Exmoor, Dartmoor, the Pennines too, but across Scotland, sunshine and showers, highs of up to 17 degrees. So then as we go through Wednesday, a bit of a cloudy start in places with some rain, but otherwise it is a day of sunny spells and some scattered showers. Not everywhere is going to see those showers, and in the sunshine actually feeling pleasant enough. And then as we go Thursday and Friday, more rain in the forecast for some of us, but turning warmer with highs of 23 in the south. Bye-bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Someone is going to win the biggest prize package to date, and that someone could be you, driving away in this Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It has plenty of room for your family of 4, comes complete with kitchen, bathroom and all the space you'll need for life on the road. Plus, we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Breaking story in this past hour. Horror at the Liverpool Trophy Victory Parade as a car collides with the crowd. We'll have a full update on that story and a statement from Merseyside Police. Elsewhere in today's news.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
And that was JD Vance just a few months ago, certainly putting the cat amongst the pigeons on free speech in Britain, making his stance very, very clear. And today we learned the White House is monitoring the case of Lucy Connolly, denied release from prison over a tweet, accused of stirring up a racial hatred. Elsewhere, Chagosian migrants are moving to Britain en masse over Sir Keir Starmer's deal to hand over their homeland to Mauritius. But could there be a political plot twist that nobody saw coming? Because could a growing band of exiled Chagosians transform into a political ground game to help Nigel Farage win the next general election? Plus,
by standard attire, a suit, a collar and tie. That would be inappropriate attire for those people, and they would find it extremely offensive.
New heights